It was a bright afternoon when the mansion gates opened earlier than expected, and a polished black car rolled up the long driveway. The millionaire, a man whose world revolved around business deals, boardrooms, and wealth beyond imagination, had come home unannounced. He expected silence, perhaps the usual pristine stillness of his estate. Instead, what he saw from a distance stopped him cold. Right there, on the perfectly paved path in front of his luxurious home, was the janitor he had hired for small maintenance tasks, a man in his 30s, with worn-out clothes and tired eyes. But he wasn't alone. Kneeling beside him was a young woman, about 23, struggling to keep her balance with a pair of crutches. Her face carried a quiet resilience, a courage built from years of hardship. She was his daughter. The millionaire froze, his hand gripping his briefcase tighter, his heart thudding with a mix of confusion and disbelief. What was going on? Why were they here, his janitor and a disabled young woman, on the front steps of his mansion, in a moment that looked too raw, too human, to belong in his carefully curated world? If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of compassion, please take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Kindness Corner for more stories that touch the heart and remind us of what really matters. The janitor's name was Daniel. He was 30 years old, a single father who had been carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders since tragedy struck years ago. His wife had passed away when their daughter, Emily, was only 10. Emily had been born with a condition that made walking painful and difficult, forcing her to rely on crutches. Life had never been easy for Daniel. He worked countless odd jobs, cleaning, fixing, and doing whatever he could to provide. Yet no matter how hard he worked, it always seemed like life demanded more than he had to give. Some days he skipped meals so Emily could eat. Other days he worked himself to exhaustion, only to come home and see his daughter smile, the one thing that kept him going. On this particular day, Daniel had been asked to fix something at the mansion. Emily had begged to come along, not wanting to stay home alone again. She loved the outdoors, loved the sun on her face, and though moving was hard, she never let her disability take away her joy of being beside her father. As Daniel worked, she stumbled, her crutches slipping on a puddle left by the sprinklers. He dropped everything and rushed to her side, spreading his old jacket on the ground so she wouldn't scrape her hands. He reassured her gently, his voice filled with patience and love. To anyone else, it might have looked like a small, ordinary moment. But to the millionaire standing frozen at his doorstep, it was a revelation, a glimpse into a world he had never known. The millionaire had everything money could buy: cars, mansions, vacations, a seat at the most exclusive tables. But watching Daniel's devotion to his daughter, he felt something he had long forgotten, something he couldn't purchase, no matter how large his bank account. He saw a man who had so little, yet gave everything. He saw a daughter whose courage shone brighter than her limitations. He saw love in its purest form. Daniel had no idea he was being watched. He carefully lifted Emily to her feet, brushing off her clothes and encouraging her to try again. "We don't give up," he whispered, steadying her crutches. She nodded, determination in her eyes, her smile braver than any millionaire's empire. It was then that the wealthy man realized he had been missing something far greater than material wealth. As the days unfolded, Daniel's struggles became clearer. He worked long hours as a janitor, but his paycheck was barely enough to cover Emily's medical expenses, let alone her dream of continuing her education. Emily wanted to study, to prove that she was more than her disability. She wanted to stand tall, not just on her crutches, but in life. Yet every step forward felt like a mountain, and every bill that landed on their table felt like another chain pulling them back. Still, Daniel never complained. He carried his pain quietly, believing that as long as Emily smiled, he could endure anything. The millionaire found himself unable to forget what he had seen that day. It haunted him, echoing in his mind during meetings and dinners. He thought of Daniel's weary hands, Emily's determined smile, and the way love shone brighter than hardship. Slowly, something began to shift in him. For the first time in years, his wealth felt empty. His mansion felt too large, too silent, too lonely. Weeks later, fate intervened again. The millionaire returned home early once more, only to find Daniel cleaning the marble floors of his grand hallway while Emily sat nearby, quietly reading a second-hand book. Her face lit up as she turned the pages, her world alive in stories despite the struggles around her. The millionaire paused, then stepped closer, his voice softer than usual. He asked about her book. Emily looked up shyly, then explained her dream of one day writing stories of her own, stories that could inspire people like her, who felt overlooked by the world. The words pierced his heart. Here was a young woman with every reason to give up, yet she dreamed not for herself, but to uplift others. And here was her father, a man society might dismiss as just a janitor, but whose love and sacrifice had raised such a resilient soul. The millionaire knew what he had to do. Quietly at first, then with more determination, he began to help. He arranged better medical care for Emily, not as charity, but as an investment in a life that deserved more. He offered Daniel a stable job with better pay, recognizing the dignity in his hard work. And slowly, he invited them into his world, not as employees, but as people who had reminded him of humanity, of love, of everything money couldn't buy. Daniel resisted at first, his pride strong, his fear of pity even stronger. But Emily looked at her father and whispered that maybe, just maybe, accepting kindness wasn't weakness, it was another form of strength. And so, for the first time in years, Daniel allowed someone else to help carry the weight. The journey wasn't easy. There were still struggles, setbacks, and tears. But there was also hope, real hope that grew stronger each day. Emily's health improved, her education blossomed, and Daniel's weary face began to soften with relief. And for the millionaire, a man who once believed wealth was his greatest achievement, the greatest riches he ever found came not from money, but from a janitor's love for his daughter. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with friends and family, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Stories like these remind us that true wealth lies not in money, but in kindness, sacrifice, and love. Special request: before you go, please comment below with the words, "Kindness matters," if you believe love and compassion can change lives.